Good morning. This is Norma Cowie for our usual Wednesday morning Norma Talks. I still have a strange voice. I have more of a sinus issue with my system right now. I tell you, I've been through the gambit. April is basically gone. I've been one thing after the other of this whole month of April. This last week I've been able to see a few clients, and that's been wonderful. That's really brings everything in. But I'm still talking. I don't know. I call it my cold voice, but I don't know if I have a cold anymore. Really, it's more now in my sinuses right up here. But anyway, life goes on, and one of the elements, and I have to go back to my Monday night, which I started again on the mental mind treatment. When we are treating or praying or whatever you want to call that, we go into a knowing place. We go into a knowing place that this is it. This is the reality. Now, you've heard me talk about this a lot of time. I'm sorry, I have to cough a sec. You've heard me talk about this before if you've watched these shows. How important how we think. And as I say, thinking, feeling, and responding are the three major ways we create our world. Thinking is the framework. How we think is the framework to put out to the universe of what we are wanting. Now, I know in a lot of religions and a lot of books, they say that knows. But how does it know? No one ever says this is how it knows. So I'm going to tell you how it knows. How it knows is by how you think. So if you are scrambled in your thinking, if you're, all over the place, it's like well, what do they want? What are they wanting? What is it this? Is it that? Is it the other? And so that's when your life gets scrambled. And we've all been there. We've all not really clear about where we want to go and what we want to do. And the universe always responds. So if your life is a shambles, you've got to take a look, first of all, what am I actually thinking day by day? What is my thoughts going out? What am I asking for? Because in a sense, that's what you're doing. You're asking for it, whatever it is. And if it's a mess, yeah, that's what you're asking for, because the universe responds, how we think. And then the feelings that go behind, I always say, fill the walls up of the house you're building. Then that gives it power. The feelings give thought power. And then, but mostly we create by how we're responding to everything, because we just either get more crazy or we get more calm or we get more clear. The important element is to become clear. The more clear you are, the easier it is for the universe to know what it is you want and to bring it. Now, I'm not saying that's always easy. Hasn't always easy been for me to do that, even though I know the reality of the fact that this is what works, because I've proven to myself over and over this. When I get clear in my mind, and a step I'm going to talk about in a second, then what I want happens and comes back, or is created, or I get to see, oh, that's not quite exactly right. We need to shift this a bit. Now, the space that I know works is what I call a knowing space. I talk a lot about this to my transformation clients, because we're wanting them to create. They're having this work done so that they can create in their lives. And I quite often make little notes on my sheets that I work off. And one of the things I find very often I've written knowing is because if you do not know what it is that you want, how does the universe know what you want? Knowing is really the feeling inside that this is an absolute. There is no ifs, ands, and buts. And I'm just going to go back to something that happened on Monday night. One of the requests for a treatment showed up, and I see this often, I'm just using this as an example, as having a lot of fear around the answer of that. And that was the first thing I had to address in my treatment, was to release the fear. But then what happened was this massive circle of angels singing, and I've not ever seen this before, and it impressed me. It stayed with me, actually, because I've heard a lot about angels. I have a friend that's always about her angels and etc. And I was not really what you would call an angel person. And when I saw this ring and this circle, it reminded me of, usually every Christmas, I write a little Christmas story, which, and when I used to speak at centers, I would present it. And now I have presented a couple Christmases through here. And it does talk about how a multitude of angels came and started singing right at Christ's birth. And now I have an image of it because I've seen it. And now I know at a different level how that works. Before it was, you might say, a mental conjecture. I could see it because I've read it in the book and I could sort of see it, but now I know it because I've seen it. I've seen it in a reality. I could hear the kind of the noise that was being projected onto this situation. So let's take a look at, let's just break this down a little bit. What happens when we want something, but we're scared, fearful that it's not going to happen? It's like putting a barricade up. Fear in some ways, and almost like we have different things you might say. I don't really talk about enemies, but fear is really an enemy against getting what you want. And it's like, fear is we don't get what we want. It is absolutely no belief. And that's the one thing we need to be careful of, because we must have belief in what is happening and what is creating. So fear, first of all, take a look at, what is it I'm not believing? Am I not believing that what I want can occur? And if that's true, where are the obstacles? What are the obstacles that are stopping that so that there is no fear? So when we begin to release the fear, what happens is we move into this, what I call the knowing place. We know it. Now, I've had many instances in my life where I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but I always had a basic sense of what I wanted or the direction I wanted. And that's when miracles began to happen around me. And I would be at the right place at the right time. Somebody would say something and everything would open up for me. That's how faith is built up. I don't believe a person just has ultimate faith. Like, oh yeah, I have faith in that. I think because that's kind of high up in the head rather than in the body. When you know something, when you know you don't know how, what, when, or where, but you know it's going to occur, you feel it in your body. You know that in your body, this is going to be how it is. But what I find is, excuse me again, what I find is that people aren't taught how to know. They're taught how to fear. In fact, right now, there's a lot of fear in our world, a tremendous amount of fear in our world. Frightened to go here, frightened to do that, frightened of, and that does not do well for the body. The body doesn't like lots of fear. It gets tense. I said, no, there's no trust and faith. One of the elements I work with people a lot is having trust and faith in the self first, and then with the universe or the world or whatever you want to call that. But it's how do you have and build up trust and faith is by taking little steps and proving that, oh, that worked. Oh, that feels better. Oh, that makes a difference. And so as you move through the different phases of letting go of your fear, of coming to a place of recognizing more, do I want this or do I not want this? I do that a lot. I in one of my books, I think it's Secrets for Living Happily, I say, draw a line down a page and put down what you, usually we know what we don't want, by the way. Most of us don't go around thinking about what we do want. We go around knowing what we don't want. So what we do, in order to get the mind moving into a different direction, you make a list of what you don't want. And then you go look at that number one, and you go, well, if I don't want this, then I must want that. You write down on your want side. Now, sometimes when I began doing this, I sometimes had to change that 2 or 3 times. Like I would look at that, no, I don't think that's really what I want. So if that's not what I want, then I must want this. I used to often use the example because as a woman, I would go to my closet Do I want to wear green today? No, I don't really want to wear green. Maybe I want to wear pink. No, I don't want to wear pink. So you kind of go through all the things that you want till you finally go, yeah, that's what the color I want to wear. Well, that's what you can do similar to your don't want list. You take your don't want list and slowly move them bit by bit into a wanted list so that then you can become aware of where your thoughts are. Because if your thoughts are going to your not wanted list, that means you're telling the universe, this is what I want, but it's on your don't want list. So you need to move it whatever it is, into your want list so that your thoughts begin to project. The universe hears your thoughts. I know when we think of all the, what have we got, 9 billion, 7, 8, 9 billion people all thinking, but you want to rise above the clam tram down there to being clear. So the universe goes, oh, look, they want this. Oh, okay, a little bit of corrections here and there. And there you are. There's what you've got. I can tell you a very strange story about how this works. I had just gone through a breakup, which was then followed a little while later, actually quite a few years later. But yeah, it seemed like short, but it wasn't really. It was a few years and different, where I ended up having to face bankruptcy. Now, there's a long story about the bankruptcy because it all was related to 9/11, which had happened many, many years ago, but I was never able to get out of what had occurred about then. And I know I've discussed that one other time. We'll just leave that back there. So I was kind of low. I didn't know where I was going to go. I did have a little apartment. I was kind of having to get back on my feet, so to speak. Wasn't sure quite how I was going to do that. When I went with a friend, we were going to the same chiropractor and we visited a mall I had never visited before, walking around the mall. And there was a gal who used to work in the psychic shows I used to produce. And she took one look at me. Psychic people do this. She said, you look like you need some money. Not very proud. This was the person that ran all the fairs, that had the money, that had everything. I had the big house, the big everything. I was living the good life. And I looked at her and I said, yeah, I do. She said, well, look, hey, I'm going to give you this person's number. They are running some psychic things in malls. Now, interestingly enough, many years ago, I began that. But then when I started moving into the bigger productions, I pulled away from that. And two girls came forward and started doing them. So I looked at that. Now, remember this, pride. To make this phone call I had to have no pride. I had to put that aside and face the reality. Do you know how often we stop ourselves because of pride? Because how could we be that? How could we show we don't have what we did have? So anyway, I made the phone call. There was great resistance to me joining this group. I'm a tarot card reader. The main person was a tarot card reader. And she really fought this. I said, well, I do other things. I draw auras. And actually what she didn't know is I'd made up a number system so I could read, which was like reading tarot to me. But anyway, I said, I can draw auras. I talked myself into a job. Now, I'll tell you something. During that time, a lot of things was changing. I had found a house that was going to be free for 6 months. And we had moved in on the Saturday. We had Sunday. Then Monday, I was to begin working about quite a drive from where I was now going to be living into a mall. Now, working mall hours, sitting there like I used to think about a little doggy in the window in an enclosed area where the world walked by you. And I did have some notoriety in that. I'd been on TV a lot. I'd been around. I was well known. People would stop and talk to me. Anyway, that's not the point. The point was I had to swallow a lot of pride. I had to sit there and for very little money, do these readings and drawing auras and talking. And then I developed this technique of reading without cards. So what I'm getting at is that saved me. The first week I worked there, I made $1,000. When you haven't got any money, well, not much anyway, $1,000 is a lot of money. And then the next week, the same thing happened. And I think I made more. But anyway, that began. But the whole thing is not so much that I had to sit in these malls, which I did not like. Oh, man, boy, I didn't want to be there. But I was, because of necessity. Because I was not only me, there was other people that I was supporting. That's another story I won't bore you with. Now, what happened was, when you have a knowing place that you're going to be taken care of in one way, I didn't know how. I just knew something had to shift and change. It came from not what I expected, someone I hadn't seen for maybe 4 years. It came by me actually having to stand and say, and knowing the knowingness is what I'm getting at. I know I had to do this, even though I didn't want to, even though it disturbed my pride element, all of those things. I knew this is being put before me. Anyway, I did it, and I did it for a long time until I had to have some knee surgeries and for years, a number of years, several years, not a lot of years, but several years. And then I moved up here to where I live, city I live in now, Penticton, and my life changed again. But that intermediate time, it put me back on my feet. It got me back out there. I found students again. I had students start coming and studying. And that whole area that had been so dark and dismal and sad, and how could I have gone bankrupt? I just couldn't believe it. Well, I do know why. But as I said, an event that had happened I had nothing to do with affected me so much that was the end result. Now, plus a marriage breakup, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm getting at is that you inside, you must know what it is that you want. Inside, you got to trust the universe will bring to you what you want, even though it may not look like what you think you want. That's happened to me many times in my life since. Probably happened many times before that, and I didn't recognize it. When you know what you want, or when life presents you, like I didn't know anything when I was offered to go down and what do you call it? Show up for a TV series show that we're doing. I was young, very young, actually quite young. And so, in fact, I was the youngest one that ended up being hired. So long story short, every Monday, I ended up reading cards in this TV show. That's how everything began. But it began because I was working in a metaphysical bookstore. Who gave my name? I have no idea. I have no idea how that happened. I had my own cable shows after that. I had lots of things happen. I did a lot of radio shows for people. One thing, I replied when I was offered an opportunity. I went there and I got the job. I didn't even think about it. It was like, oh yeah. And then the first top I wore, the first thing he said, don't ever wear that again. It doesn't go on TV. It was a cream colored thing. Don't wear that. And it was shiny. Don't wear that. I went, okay. So I just went along and I learned a great deal from those ages. So later on, I began to realize things come along. And a lot of people, because of fear, will say no, because they're scared or they're not sure. In my innocence in the beginning, I went along. And so then things were offered. Things came along and I said yes to them. And some of them worked out great and some did not. Some ended up eventually where, wow, what am I doing here in this space? How did I get here? Well, it doesn't matter wherever you're there. How do you get out? And that's where you know in your heart that the universe has your back. And you have to have this mind of yours without fear and concentrating on what you want. Sometimes it can be just a little thing, but you can't be obsessed. A little warning came in my mind. It's not about obsession. It's about knowing. And that's deeper in, you can't see your solar plexus. It's deeper in you because that's where the ball of universal love resides for you to know that you're loved beyond measure at all times. Well, as often when I start talking, I never quite know where it's going to go. But you know what? In the last few days, this last week, as I got back into work, this kept coming up, that people having to say again, you've got to know what you want for the universe to respond. And I want you to remember that. Get clear on what you want. Remember that exercise. What I don't want, because often that's what you're creating, and what I do want. And that's what you've got to know can be. You don't know. It's not for you to know how, when, or where. It's for you to know that it is. I call it isness. It is. It will be. Thank you for watching. Thank you for, by the way, the support emails that are coming in. Yes, I am getting better. I'm feeling better. I just want this voice to go back to normal. I think it's all in my sinuses now, so it's kind of coming up and out. I really want to thank those for subscribing. I just got notification there was a new subscriber. Thank you. I appreciate every one of them. I appreciate everyone. Your shares, your likes. And remember, if you do subscribe, press the bell, and it'll let you know when I'm on live. This is not recorded live, but my other two things are. Wish you well. Stay happy, and lots of love. Bye now.